Welcome, students, to another chapter in political science, that is, chapter number 4, Social and Political Movements. This video is presented by Grecienne Misquitta. The images and information used in this video are taken from different internet websites. In the previous chapter, we looked at different political parties, the role of political parties, as well as the difference between national political parties and regional political parties. In this chapter, we are going to look at importance of movements, the meaning of movements, important movements in India, the tribal movement of India, and the farmers' movement in India. As we all know, there are many movements that have taken place in a country like ours since pre-independence time. One can remember the contribution of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the founder of the Brahmo Samaj, as well as he carried out a socio-religious reform movement in the Indian subcontinent. We also hear about different movements in newspapers carried out by the general public of India today. Movements against child marriage has been successful to a great extent, and the extent of child marriages in India have reduced up to 50%. The workers in this movement worked very closely and made sure that the social evil of child marriage would be eradicated completely out of our country. Workers from this movement also helped to carry out another social evil and get rid of it, that is dowry. Now there is a need to start a drive against malnutrition because poverty and malnutrition are two important problems, major problems of our country. In the last chapter, we got information about the national and regional parties. Political parties compete for political power. They win elections and try to resolve the problems of the common man. Political parties generally adopt a comprehensive perspective. When we say it's comprehensive, we say a whole or wider range of perspective. They cannot concentrate on just one particular issue. From public cleanliness to space research, they have to take into consideration all matters from national perspective and take decisions. Political parties are expected to have a program for the problems of all sections of the society. Political parties adopt policies taking into consideration the interest of all farmers, laborers, businessmen, women, youth, and senior citizen. As one can say, why these movements are so important to us? Well, we all know that all people in the society cannot participate and be a part of a political party and contribute to the social welfare of the society by being a part of that party. Hence, some people focus on one particular issue and try to pursue it, or one can say, try to solve it. They organize people and try to pressurize the government to resolve that issue by forming a group. They constantly follow up on the issue as well as they build public opinion about it and thereby put a pressure on the political parties and the government to solve it or find a solution as soon as possible. This type of organized activity is called a movement. Organized activity is the essence, or you can say the most important part of any movement. One can say a nationalist movement is a social and political movement for obtaining and maintaining national identity and autonomy among a group of people that some of its members consider a nation. There are different national movements as well as regional movements that have taken place in our country. One can say the national movement in our country began when we started demanding for a free country of India. A regional movement comprises of an uprising of people in a particular region fighting against a social evil or for a social cause. Such movements, or one can say a protest, are very important in a democracy. It is like giving the public a voice to speak out their issues and problems to the government or any ruling authority. Different social problems come under discussion through these movements. The government then has to pay attention to such problems. Leaders and activists of the movement provide necessary information about those issues to the government. This information is very useful for the government while making policies. Let me name some few movements that have taken place in India. The laborers' movement, one can say the movement started by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, was a social reform movement for removal of sati, as well as the movement of Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, the Dandi March during the independence period, and so on and so forth. These movements are recorded down in history and have brought a major change in the society. Some movements aim at opposing a particular decision or policy of the government. The right to protest is considered as a very important right in a democracy. However, this right needs to be used patiently and responsibly by the citizens living in. There are many protests and movements that have been taken place in a country like India over the past decade. Here are an images of few protests that have taken place in the last 2 years, including 2020. The farmers' protest in India is the most recent protest. the protest against the Citizenship Amendment Act was taken place in the year 2019, as well as we know there have been multiple rape cases that have been taken place in India, and many women are out protesting to change the rape laws and make it more secure for women in a country like India. Speaking over, the Citizenship Amendment Act, as you know, came into being in December 2019. As soon as this act was enacted, protests against it erupted thereafter, with Assam being the focus where protesters linked it with the National Register of Citizens, the NRC. The protesters of CAA opposed CAA for allowing citizenships to immigrants who came in after 1971. The farmers' protest over new farm laws during the COVID 2019 was also seen. Delhi became the theatre of yet another public protest, this time by farmers mainly from Punjab and Haryana, but also some from Kerala, over the three farm laws brought out first as ordinance by the government and later enacted by the parliament. Hence, these were some of the protests that really impacted mass majority of the population. Let's look at the next topic of what is a movement. A movement is a collective action where people's active participation is expected to organize a protest or a movement. A movement can be formed when people come together in the interest of a particular issue. For example, pollution can be a single issue for which a movement can be created, as well as in the previous part you saw the farmers' protest against the laws, as well as citizens of Assam coming down on protest against the Citizenship Amendment Act, and many more protests that have taken place over the country. A protest or a movement can be for social or political cause. A movement has a particular social objective or a focused problem or issue. For example, movement against corruption aims at ending corruption or finding a solution to reduce corruption in a country or a region. Movements have a leadership. One can say every movement or protest has a leader. Leadership keeps the movement active. Objectives of the movement, program of action, strategy of agitation or revolt or protest are decided by its leaders, whether it will be a silent protest or movement or a violent protest or movement. A strong leadership makes movement effective and helps the government to act immediately upon that issue. Every movement have an organization attached with it. Without an organization, it becomes difficult to follow up with the issues or problems regarding to why the movement was started in the first place. For example, a farmers organization works for farmers movement. Any movement requires public support or the support of the masses. People should feel connected to the issue that is undertaken by the movement, hence, only that will make it effective. Movements have a program of action which help them to shape public opinion or bring a radical change in the society. Generally, the movements are devoted to one particular issue, but they also have an ideology behind them. For example, movements against child marriage, dowry, beliefs in values of democracy, women empowerment, and social equality. Sometimes some movements gradually get transformed into political parties. Civic problems, also can be called as social problems, need not originate or begin only in a social sphere. They can emerge from any section of the society. In India, especially in Maharashtra, many social reform movements were started and society started getting modernized. Our struggle for independence was also a social movement and turned into a political movement later ahead. The issues like protecting rights of the citizens, right to vote, minimum wages, economic security, right to education, right to life, property, as well as equality are the focus of political and economic movements. Swadeshi movement is an important economic movement in the history of our country. Well, there have been many movements in Indian history. First one we could talk about is the Holwell Monument movement. Now, the Holwell Monument is not merely a stain on the memory of the Nawab of Bengal, but has stood in the heart of Calcutta for the last 150 years or more. And that monument represents the symbol of slavery and humiliation of our country. Hence, that movement was needed and began in the year 1940. The next movement we talk about is the Khilafat movement. The Khilafat movement arose in the year 1990 as a symbol of unity among the Muslim community in India during the British Raj. The movement was initially combined with Gandhi's non-cooperation movement but fell apart after the abolition of the Caliphate in the 1924. A campaign in defense of the Caliphate was launched, led in India by the brothers Shaukat and Muhammad Ali and by Abul Kalam Azad. The leaders joined forces with Mahatma Gandhi's non-cooperation movement for Indian freedom, promising non-violence in return for his support of the Khilafat movement. There have been many tribal movements in our country since the pre-independence era. In the pre-independence period, the British government deprived tribal people of their right to livelihood on forest resources. One can say the things that were obtained from forests, they were denied and deprived of receiving those products and things that they could obtain from the forest for their basic living. There was a tribal uprising in Kolam from Chota Nagpur, Gond from Orissa, Koli, Bhilla and Ramoshis from Maharashtra, Santal and Munda from Bihar. As you can see, the revolts began in the 1800s itself. In 1899 and 1900, a revolt by the Munda tribal community, led under Birsa Munda, was led against the British. As well as in 1941, we have the Gond and the Kolam revolting against the British again, who are denying and depriving them over their rights on the forests. As you know, the tribal community and the tribal people face a lot of problems in a country like India. The main problem being their right over the forests. The tribal struggle has continued since those years. Tribals in India face several problems. One major problem is that they are denied their right over forests, as I discussed before. The main demand of the tribal movement is to accept their right over the forest, as they take the forest to be their home. They should be allowed to collect products of the forest and also should have a right to cultivate on. Farmers' movement is also not a new movement that has taken place in India today. Farmers' movement in India is an important movement. During the British period, farmers started getting organized due to the anti-agricultural policies of the British colonial government. You must be aware of farmers' movements in Bardoli, Champaranya, and movements against revenue collection. The farmers' movements were inspired by the thoughts of Mahatma Phule, Justice Ranade, and Mahatma Gandhi. Due to some reform in agriculture, like the tenancy law, laws relating to tilting of the land, etc., the farmers' movement slowed down. As you can see, that due to the new laws on farming, we had a recent farmers' movement that began in our country in the year 2020 amidst the COVID-19. The Green Revolution was a reform that changed a lot of things in the farmer's life. After the Green Revolution, the farmers' movement became more active and effective. Though Green Revolution aimed at increasing agricultural production and achieving self-sufficiency in food grains, it did not benefit the poor farmers. The farmers were now divided into rich farmers and poor farmers. Dissatisfaction among the poor farmers led to the beginning of farmers' movement. Appropriate price for agricultural products, agriculture to be treated as an industry, implementation of the recommendations of the Swaminathan Commission, debt relief, debt cancellation, national policy for agriculture are some of the demands of the farmers' movements. Shetkari Sangatna, Bharatiya Kisan Union, All India Kisan Sabha are some of the important farmers' organizations in India that work for the cause of farmers. Well, students, let's have a quick recap on all that we learned and understood in this video through this question answer session. Short notes on the tribal movement. Well, children, you know that the tribal movement began in the pre-independence period. this began as a revolt against the Britishers who deprived the tribal people of their right to livelihood on the forest resources. And we also know that these movements began in different places of our country. The next movement, the next short note we are going to talk about is the farmers' movement. Same thing. The farmers' movement in India is an important movement which began during the British period. As one can say, the anti-agriculture policies of the British led to these farmer movement, leading to various farmer movements ahead in our country. The Green Revolution was a reform that had been taken place due to the farmers movement and helped in reducing the farmers movements and protests. The next thing we are going to talk about is the give reasons whether they are true or false. Movements are important in a democracy. True. Well, movements are very important in a democracy because the right to protest is given in a democracy where people's voices and opinions are heard. Movements do not need a strong leadership. False. Every movement needs to have a strong leadership. Leadership keeps the movement active, and objectives of the movement, plan of action, strategy of agitation are decided by its leader. Thank you, students. Hope you enjoyed this video.